Hello, everyone. My name is Scott Lee Master. I'm chairman of the Technion Board of Governors, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar, which is jointly hosted by the American Technion Society and Technion UK. It is especially heartwarming to see so many friends from around the world have joined us today. I'd like to just share the names of a few countries that are with us: Angola, Australia, Brazil, Canada, Germany, China, Israel, Netherlands, Turkey, South Africa, United Kingdom, and Uruguay. It is at times like this, difficult times, which remind us that we are truly an extended Technion family. As chairman, I have witnessed firsthand the urgency with which the Technion addressed the COVID-19 crisis. And I am proud that our university is at the forefront of science and technology worldwide, seeking answers to the challenges that the entire world is facing, not just for the current pandemic, but for the good of all mankind going forward. As our communities worldwide begin to ease the life-saving stay-at-home orders, government officials are facing an economy that is expected to see at least 25,000 Israeli businesses closed, a spike in unemployment to nearly 25%, up from 4%, and a 6% fall in Israel's GDP. This is a stark turnaround from 2019, which was a record-breaking year for Israel's economy in terms of tourism, exports, mergers, and acquisitions. At the outset of the crisis, my friend Uri Savan made this comment: "For all of us, the atmosphere is unsettling, but my own experience tells me that if handled correctly, by focusing first on saving lives and on containing the danger, such crises may eventually turn into a source of strength and insight." We are honored to have Professor Savan with us today to share his thoughts on the current situation. He is a renowned physicist with expertise in nanotechnology and was the founding director of the Russell Berry Nanotechnology Institute at the Technion. Now, as president of the Technion, the first university in Israel, he has turned his focus on academia and the role it will play in Israel's post-pandemic universe. Also joining us is Dr. Irit Idan. Dr. Idan is the executive vice president for research and development of Rafael, Israel's third largest defense company, and a pioneer of its technological accelerator, Technion. She is also deeply connected to the Technion, where she received her PhD in astrophysics and serves as a member of the Technion Council and the Technion Board of Governors. Our first speaker will be David Horowitz, the founding editor of the Times of Israel. Launched in 2012, the Times of Israel is the fastest growing current affairs website in Israel and the Jewish world. The Times is published in English, French, Arabic, and Persian, and last year added a Hebrew site, Zaman Yisrael. David will provide us with a broad overview from his position as a leading Israeli journalist. And I'm very pleased to see Paul Charney, chairman of Technion UK, who will be joining us to share some closing remarks. If you have any questions for our panelists, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the webinar window. All questions will be held until the end of the presentations. Today's program is being recorded for future viewing. David, Irit, Idan, thank you for being with us today. To start our diverse look at Israel's post-pandemic economy, I turn the program over to David Horowitz for his perspective on how and when the economy will bounce back. David?
Okay, thank you, Scott. Thank you, everybody who's on this call. It's a pleasure to be doing this call with you. I hope you hear me okay. It's a little after 7 o'clock in Jerusalem. Wherever you are all over the world, that long list of countries, including the United States, of course, really happy that you're on this call. Briefly, first of all, my connection to the Technion is not as a student, I should stress, but as an admirer who's been privileged to speak on behalf of the Technion in many places, notably including the United States, many times over the years, and I get to highlight the Technion's radically central role, I would say, in the Israeli economy, science, tech, medicine, innovation, the overwhelming proportion of Israeli firms run by and established by Technion grads. the endless, groundbreaking, cutting-edge work that it does. I get to visit the Technion ahead of the trips that I make. So I get sometimes to see the labs and the computer surgery and the nanotech work and the cancer research. Quite astonishing. And obviously, basically everybody else on this panel, on this call, knows a great deal more about all of that than I do. So they'll talk more about that. What I'll do is briefly give you some kind of overview of how Israel has been handling the COVID-19 pandemic, where we stand now, and a little bit at the end about how it's affected our work at the Times of Israel. So first of all, I think Israel recognized the potential danger and the very real danger pretty early. The Prime Minister, not too long ago, in one of his not infrequent addresses to the nation about policy, recalled a lecture, early lecture he had when he was studying in the States, a statistics lecture, when the lecturer spoke about how viruses spread on an exponential basis. And he was very impressed by that. And he said it was sort of etched in his memory. And therefore, when he heard that there was a pandemic on the loose, that lecture came back and he thought, you know what, we need to move fast on this. So relative to other countries, we closed down the airport, not hermetically right away, but I think we were among the first countries that told citizens, if you don't have to travel abroad, don't do it. And then we did actually close down the airport. And then there was this very strong message about staying home, again, quite early in the process. If you want to minimize contagion, stay home, element 2. And I think element 3 was the use of digital tracking from very early on, somewhat controversial. We have to make sure that those provisions are overseen properly. But the fact was that we instituted technology, which meant that you were told that if a few days after, inadvertently, you'd been very close for 10 minutes or so to somebody who turned out to have the virus, you should go into quarantine. You know, you all know about these techniques. We did them pretty early. I think those 3 factors were important. Netanyahu early on made some really dramatic comparisons and some really bleak potential assessments. He made comparisons with the Spanish flu and things from even earlier that could be even worse. And he spoke in terms of, you know, he intimated that tens of millions of people could die around the world, and certainly that tens of thousands of Israeli lives were at stake. Now, I'm not sure that the people of Israel necessarily believed all of those assessments, but they were probably floating around at the back of people's minds. And when he also said things like, you know, if you love your grandparents, stay away from them, people heeded it. So people were pretty responsive to the restrictions as they came into force. This is a very savvy citizenry in this country, and we saw it all playing out. You know, it's a democracy. We saw on TV every night in the early weeks of this crisis, people from the Treasury saying, you know, I think we're overdoing it. We shouldn't be locking down the economy as much as we are. And people from the health ministry saying, no, this can get out of hand if we don't lock down and if we don't institute some of these regulations. And people concluded that the government was kind of steering a middle line between the, you know, let's take it a little easier and the let's take it tougher. And they respected that. I don't think it's been perfect the way we've dealt with it. There was poor communication, for example, with the ultra-Orthodox community. Not all of whose members have the same connections, media connections, and are, you know, many of them are not watching TV and don't have smartphones and so on. So there were some failures. Once the message got out, it was basically heeded across Israeli society. There were other inefficiencies. The airport wasn't as effectively a barrier as it could have been for the first couple of weeks, where people were not quarantined when they were coming in from abroad and so on. It's not clear how well we're doing now as we open up. Schools are basically back, but there's about 10,000 students and staff in quarantine because somewhere in their school somebody tested positive. We have a lot of kids in classrooms in Israeli schools. I'm not sure how typical that is and how much of a problem that's going to be. But overall, if you look at how we're doing, I would say that relatively speaking, it's astounding. And many of you have probably heard some of these comparisons, so I'll do this briefly. But, you know, we have fewer than 300 dead here. Those are terrible cases, right? Every one of them is heartbreaking and terrible. But when you make comparisons, when you compare us to countries with similar size populations, the Belgiums and the Swedens, we are immensely less badly hit in terms of death tolls. To take the UK, for example, I mean, Israel's got a population of about 9 million. Britain has a population of about 65 million, so about 7 times our population, and about 100 times our toll. The United States, about 30 times the Israeli population, and about 300 times our death toll. So, Jewish communities, if you didn't gather already, I grew up in London. The British Jewish community, which is maybe 300,000 people, has had more deaths than all of Israel has had. So relatively speaking, our performance has been, relatively very, very good. There's so much we still don't understand about this. There are people who've said, well, it's not that much of a success story in Israel because look at places like Greece and Lebanon, among others. In other words, countries in the neighborhood that are providing figures even better, if you like, than ours. So Greece, I don't know what to make of that. People will have their theories. Lebanon, can we be confident that their knowledge of what is going on and their capacity to report as clearly as we can? I'm not sure we can share the confidence. But again, it underlines that there's so much that we don't really understand still about this virus. Much of the focus of this call is going to be on, economics after the pandemic and so on. So economically, I don't think we're quite as successful. There have been some missteps. There's been a lot of government help, but it's not always been as available as it should have been. And there's a lot of argument about whether it's been directed as effectively and as appropriately as it should have been. The economy has hurt very much. We had less than 4% unemployment in Israel when this crisis began. And we, at its height, the unemployment was 25, 26%. A million Israelis unemployed. That's starting to come down now. But most estimates suggest there'll be maybe 400,000 unemployed at the end of this crisis, assuming, as we'd like to assume, but we can't really assume, that some kind of end is in sight. So there's a partial economic meltdown. A lot of harm to small businesses and independent businesses, a lot of work to be done. A couple other things I want to touch on, just in terms of comparisons with other countries. For me personally, this is a country that's very divided, Orthodox, secular, Jew, Arab, left, right, and yet we've held together incredibly well in this crisis in terms of social compact, mutual consideration, if you like. I think that's emblemized. Many of you would have seen the photograph of an ambulance crew, 2 paramedics outside their ambulance, one Muslim, one Jewish, one praying towards Mecca, one praying towards Jerusalem, which were in opposite directions. That's kind of emblematic, holding together, being mutually responsible as a society, something that we maybe took for granted in Israel, but we shouldn't take for granted, I don't think. And just very briefly, I'll touch a little bit on our work at the Times of Israel. And I think it's relevant for what the Technion stands for as well, the efforts to get things right, to be responsible. So in our journalism field, we've tried to understand what's been going on, to report it effectively, not to sensationalize, to speak to lots of experts when there are real, genuine breakthroughs on the road to a vaccine, to report them, but without overstating and so on, to try to give readers a sense of clarity. And I think, that's been appreciated. We've seen, a great deal of traffic on the site. I don't want to start bragging about numbers, but I think, there's a lot of toxicity in terms of the international climate in some of your countries. This pandemic has exacerbated some social divides, but I also think there is, maybe a largely silent majority who are serious, who are nuanced, who want to understand what's going on, who are respectful of each other. And we have tried at the Times of Israel to be part of the constructive, effective provision of information and perspective and so on. And I think people are receptive to that. So that's how it's looked from our from our particular perspective, as we've dealt with this like anybody else in Israel, with reporters often working from home. Some reporters who were in quarantine for a little bit of time because they happened to be in a place where somebody tested positive. We have reporters whose spouses work in the medical services and so on, who were on the front line. We've had people, of course, home with their young kids, as lots of us were for many weeks. And we've tried to deal with it and do our work, as everybody has across Israeli society, as best as possible. And with that, I'm going to shut up, and I'm going to move this on to Dr. Irit Idan, who is going to give her insightful look at the economy from a business perspective. Thank you, everybody. Over to you.
Thank you, David. Hope you all see the screen. Good morning, afternoon, and evening. And thank you both Technion US and UK Society for the opportunity to be part of this special event. Let me start briefly by introducing myself. First, I'm a proud graduate of the Technion. I got my 3 degrees from the Department of Physics, where my graduate work was in astrophysics, focusing mainly on binary stars, supernova evolution, and related topics. Well, until this day, I'm glad to be able to cooperate with my colleagues at the Technion and to continue my passion in theoretical and numerical astrophysics. I served on the board of governors of the Technion and on its council. I am married to a Technion professor, and our 2 children are students at the Technion. Altogether, we are a real proud Technion family. After graduating from the Technion, I joined Raphael as a theoretical physicist. And as of 2017, I am the Executive Vice President for Research and Development of this amazing company, being the first woman in the defense industry in Israel that holds such position. I'm in charge on Raphael internal R&D and its budget. And it's my responsibility to choose the future technologies that the company will need in the short and long term. Now, Raphael is the 3rd largest defense company in Israel and has a worldwide reputation as being a leader in developing cutting-edge solutions for the defense market. We are well known for our defense systems such as Iron Dome trophy, used by the Israeli Defense Forces and the US Army. Just a couple of months ago, as you can see, the Forbes magazine chose Iron Dome and trophy to be in a short list of the 12 most important new weapon systems of the decade. A huge honor for Israel and for Raphael. Well, Raphael was founded 72 years ago with the State of Israel. And last year, our sales exceeded $2.5 billion. We have over 8,000 employees. 65% of them are scientists and engineers. Majority of them are Technion graduates. In addition of being a successful business company, Raphael acts as a national laboratory with over 20 centers of excellence recognized by the Israeli Ministry of Defense in the areas such as quantum optics, propulsion, computer vision, and more. Over the year, recognizing our exceptional achievements, we received 52, actually as of last week, 53 Israel Defense Award, a number that cannot be matched by any other company in the country. From the early years, Raphael has focused on high-end technologies, mainly missile systems with unique capabilities in the area of electro-optical, seeker, image processing, and RF communication. In the last 3 years, we added to our portfolio data analysis, artificial intelligence, and cyber technologies. Raphael is the prime contractor for the Israeli CERT, the Computer Emergency Response Team. We are in charge of the cybersecurity of the Israeli Railways Company, the Central Credit Database of Bank of Israel, and other national and international bodies. Well, COVID-19 pandemic affected the Israeli economies in the same way it affected all other countries. In Israel, as you heard from David, the government decided to close the country for incoming flights at a very early stage. Also implies strict rule of the shutdown of the economy. Still, during the pandemic, I worked double shift. Firstly, I was in charge of Raphael's contribution to the battle against the coronavirus. And in addition, I was a member in the command center run by the Israeli Ministry of Defense and the Mossad in Tel HaShomer, working mainly on the exit strategy of the country and on the supply of ventilators and more. Now, the medical world is no strange to Raphael. One of our subsidiary companies is in charge of transferring Raphael knowledge from the defense market to the commercial one. I'm sure some of you heard about the PIRCAM, a capsule that contains a miniature video camera that records images captured while passing through our digestion system. It is a spin-off of Raphael core technology in electro-optical missile seeker head. Now, from the early stage of the fight of the virus, I imposed one strict rule for Raphael contribution and hundreds of the ideas of its talented researchers and scientists. All the ideas and inventions must solve a real problem and have to be implemented in hospital within 3 to 4 weeks maximum. There is no time for long-term research. Now, our autonomous robots help medical staff in the corona wing to deliver food, medicine, or establish communication between patients and the families outside. Such robots are now acting in almost 10 Israeli hospitals. We design protective hoods for patients that require open ventilators and prevent the spread of the virus in the room. Rafael joined hands with a small company that manufactured FDA-approved ventilators and helped them to triple their production lines. We designed together with the emergency room doctors adaptive sleeper for the ventilator, so one machine can be used properly for more than one patient. Almost all our designs were made available for free to anyone around the world. For example, our blueprints for adaptive splitters or the ventilators or the protective hood are now in Florida, Chile, Spain, and other countries, hopefully helping others. Now, the basic dilemmas of companies worldwide that they are facing now is the unknown future of the economy and the world's market. Now, do we lower our anchor in search for stabilities? Or should we raise the sails and look for new currents, products, and markets? We all agree that the pandemic is going to affect the world markets, but in our personal view, it's going to be mostly in the near future. In the long run, we will go back to some of our old habits. We will go back flying because as much as we learn to work with Zoom, we all feel that we need not just to see each other, we need to feel, to sit one opposite each other and to look into our partner's eyes and communicate, not just through this electronic media. Now, as I told you at the beginning of my talk, Rafael is a strong company. So we allow ourselves to do both, search for stabilities in our portfolio products by improving them and give our customer better values for their needs and money. And at the same time, we have enough courage to raise ourselves and continue investing in the future technologies for our future project, ranging from quantum technology, cyber, nano and micro satellites to hypersonics and new propulsion technology. Now, from every crisis, companies should find the benefits that will give them the ability to improve themselves. For me personally, it is the time for new and exciting collaborations. Now, the fourth industrial revolution is advancing faster in the commercial sector. This is the time for us in the defense sector to create a strong collaboration with other companies, big or small, startups, and academia. This is one of the reasons we created our innovation center in Technion in the Galil, a bridge between the open world and the highly classified defense sector. This is our front door to the fast developing world. In Technion, we are able to quickly test emerging technologies for our own internal use and to benefit the companies, community around us. For example, we cooperate with the Alim Hospital for Disabled Children in Jerusalem, trying to solve their day-to-day problems and difficulties. Using our core technology and electro-optics and communication, those kids can now play catch while sitting in the wheelchairs. We have similar projects with additional voluntary organizations, such as Makers for Heroes, that hold annual events to address daily problems of wounded veterans from around the world. We have many visitors to Technion on a daily basis, and you can see Professor Peretz Lavi, the former president of the Technion. Now, coming to my last slide, the COVID-19 pandemic is going to be with us for some time. We must focus our attention in building stronger economy, stronger collaborations among companies. Together we can find the new currents faster and more effectively. After all, it is an exciting time and we can all benefit from. Thank you. And now I would like to introduce Professor Uri Sivan, the president of the Technion, to share his strategic vision on how the Technion will have a transformative impact on the Israeli economy. Uri?
Wow, my God. וואו, אין לך קול.
Good morning. Good morning to those for those in the U.S. Good afternoon to our friends around the world. Good morning to the chairman of our board, Scott Limaster. Good evening to my co-panelists, David and Irit. And thank you to the American Technion Society and Technion UK for organizing this timely and interesting webinar. When I took office last October, I was keenly aware of the huge challenges lying ahead, but I had no idea what was in store for me in my first semester as a president of Technion. As they say in Yiddish, man tracht und Gott lacht, meaning man plans and God laughs. I will share with you the plans in a minute, but let me first share with you some of God's laughs. The pandemic was declared in Israel on March 10th, 1 week before the semester started. In just 1 week, Technion had to switch from frontal to online teaching, and the entire second semester is now being taught remotely. A feat that would have taken years under normal conditions. The ingenuity and power of improvisation of Technion faculty can be judged from the first slide. So you're welcome to take a close look at this slide, where you can see our chemistry professor, David Eisenberg, teaching his class online from his refuge from his 5 children that had to stay home since schools were closed as well. I leave it to the audience to identify some of the teaching props in his bathroom. I'm sure you can identify, for instance, the toothpaste, the bathtub, etc. Within 2 weeks, government regulations dictated an 85% cut in personnel on campus and closed all labs and research facilities except those working on COVID-19. The response on campus to those challenges was truly remarkable. In less than a month, over 50 labs across campus applied their knowledge and research capabilities in that direction. Dozens of collaborations with other research institutions, and especially hospitals here in Israel and abroad, were initiated in diverse fields such as AI and big data tools for decision makers, diagnostics and biosensors, antigens and vaccines, all the way to protective gear for the medical staff. Totally new research directions, which will stay with us for the foreseeable future. And then, and probably most importantly, there were people. Nearly 2,000 Technion employees were sent on leave of absence or forced vacation. Thousands of students lost their jobs, and many lost financial support from their families. Technion moved swiftly and decisively. Within a short while, with the help of Technion societies around the world and in Israel, a student emergency fund was established. The response was overwhelming, and we thank you all sincerely. I'm really proud to say that not even one student had to quit school due to financial hardships. We also ask our faculty members to contribute 5% of their salary over 3 months to help employees in need. The response there was also truly amazing and heartwarming. I'm proud to report that the support provided by the Technion family to its students and staff was unprecedented in Israel. So what have we learned from the pandemics? First, we learned how strong and cohesive the Technion family is and how important this is in time of crisis. The concern and solidarity shown by the Technion family worldwide has been extraordinary. Here at Technion, students, faculty, and administrative staff worked tirelessly to take the semester online, launch new coronavirus research projects, and support communities in need within Technion and in Haifa. And I'll come back to that point later. Second, we learned just how resilient and innovative Technion is. The innovation and improvisation shown by our researcher was truly remarkable. Some research projects went from drawing board to manufacturing and deployment in hospitals in Israel and the US in just 2 months. And I'll come to the conditions for that again later in my presentation. Prior to assuming office, I formulated a strategic plan for Technion, focusing on 3 directions, shown here. The first direction was restructuring research on campus to cut across the traditional boundaries between disciplines, setting up a network of multidisciplinary research institutes focused on some of the grand challenges of the 21st century: human health, energy and sustainability, and advanced manufacturing. This restructuring is really essential since the traditional structure of all universities, as well as Technion, is vertical. We are built with faculties which are disciplinary entities. However, the grand challenges of the 21st century don't really care much about our structure, and they are multidisciplinary by nature. Take, for example, human health. Obviously, human health involves medical school, and Technion has a medical school. It also involves hospitals, but it also involves life sciences, physics, chemistry, computer science, electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, and even product design. So you can see that the right structure for addressing this grand challenge is very different from the university traditional structure. And this is the reason for this deep restructuring process that we are now launching. The second vector or component in my strategic plan was developing leadership and entrepreneurial skills among our students and educating them to address social and environmental challenges and how to integrate them with the technological challenges they will face throughout their careers. Technion focuses on educating the technological leaders of tomorrow, or society leaders of tomorrow. If you think a little bit about what it takes to be a leader, you would realize that what differentiates leaders from the rest is a broader view. The fact they understand the technology they produce or the science they do in a broader context, in a context that takes into account societal aspects, environmental aspects, ethics, and so on and so forth. Well, there must be something in the air or in the drinking water of our students, because as you've seen in the previous presentation, our graduates do take leadership positions in industry. However, we believe that it is time now to educate or structure teaching those leadership skills in a more ordered way, in a more structured way. And this is a huge effort for us, which we are pursuing forward also during the coronavirus times. The third vector would be responding to the rapidly changing relationship between academia and industry. Sorry. Developing essentially a new ecosystem. The idea is the following. Traditionally, there was a clear distinction between academia and industry. Fundamental research being done at the university and then applied research done in industry. But this is no longer the case. Actually, excellent fundamental research is also being done at industry. And this is true not only for AI or big data. This is also true, for instance, with quantum computers, etc. So there is a shift in the division, the traditional division between the type of research done at universities and in industry. And that calls for very deep reflection by universities regarding their role. And we have been doing that. We are working very hard on that, basically on two aspects of it. The first one, as you can see, is streamlining technology transfer from the university to industry. The timescales in which one needs now to transfer technologies from the lab to industry is much faster. If it could be years, several years ago, but now one has to shift this technology or transfer this technology within months, and in certain areas within weeks. The other aspect is actually bringing industry into campus, using many more lecturers or mentors from industry to guide our students, both in fundamentals, but also in aspects that exist in industry more than in academia. For instance, system engineering, that would be a good example for that. When COVID-19 struck, it was as if someone pressed fast forward. This was very surprising because we expected that everything will now halt, but just the opposite thing happened. Everything went on fast forward, and the importance of these strategic directions that we crystallized before the COVID-19 pandemics became important essentially overnight. The paradox is generally true for the COVID-19 crisis. Putting aside the financial and health hardships, the crisis has brought with it remarkable new opportunities in education, domestic and international scientific collaborations, and faster lanes to commercialization. Edith has already referred to that. Science and technology, especially in the context of human health, which is one, if not the major development direction we identified, found themselves once more in center stage. The public is now much more interested in science and technology, and there is also more significant attention among decision makers. Going online gives access to remote communities, joint courses, joint projects, even joint degrees. The technology for that, of course, existed before COVID-19, but the crisis did something very important. It forced us to cross a mental barrier, and that alone opened new horizons. The other strategic goals I've mentioned, boosting multidisciplinary research and strengthening collaboration with private industry, have also been fast-tracked by the crisis. Traditional barriers between disciplines instantly vanished. It's a very, very interesting phenomenon. IP walls that blocked collaborations for years came down, And the rate of technology transfer to industry, as well as the establishment of new startup companies, in fact, and surprisingly, grew dramatically during the pandemic. No doubt, this little vicious virus has pushed us all out of our comfort zone, into new territories where bold moves are made possible. And we intend to seize these opportunities. At the same time, the crisis proved the importance of readiness, the strength that comes with knowledge, with advanced research facilities, and above all, and I already referred to that, mutual support and solidarity among people. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think the floor is back with me. I don't want Irit or Uri to go very far because I just want to ask each of you a very quick question. What I think is interesting about what both of you said, underpinning what you both said, is that in this terrible, difficult period, you've managed not merely to keep functioning, but even within certain parameters to thrive. And I just want to ask each of you, maybe we'll go with you first, Uri. You mentioned that various innovative projects kind of were accelerated from early stage research to even use in hospitals and so on. So just briefly, give us an example or two of something that was pushed ahead and immense progress was made on in the last couple of months.
Well, thank you. Well, those who are interested in more details can search our website where over 50 projects related to the coronavirus are listed, and there's lots of information there. I'll just focus on a few. It's a random sample. One of the immediate needs, was for protection gear for the medical staff. In fact, the bottleneck in this crisis, and what frightened people most, is to lose the medical staff in our hospitals, either by infection or just by isolation. Turned out that the protection gear they had was insufficient. And here, very quickly, Professor Ezri Tarazi and others developed a far more efficient protection gear for the medical staff. It was already deployed in Israeli hospitals around the country, but this protection gear was in fact also deployed in New Jersey, in the Holy Name Hospital, one of the hospitals that treated one of the largest populations of infected people in the States. So this is one end. A totally different end would be AI-based and data-based, big data-based algorithms that help decision makers predict how the pandemics is going to evolve, and particularly how is it going to evolve in the different regions of Israel. And that facilitated somehow treating different areas in Israel on different footings. So that's a second example, very, very different example. The
Great.
third one would be
Just
diagnostics, which is still totally different, a totally different direction. And as you mentioned, I mean, it was amazing to see how fast all those technologies evolve. It was very impressive. And as I mentioned, I believe that part of it was the fact that we were all pushed out of our comfort zone. And turns out that when people are pushed out of their comfort zone, they're far more susceptible to make changes, to take bold moves, to give up IP rights, everything that apparently blocks us in the commercialization of technologies under normal conditions.
Thank you, Uri. Very briefly, Uri, same question to you. Is there, first of all, where can we read more, because you won't have time to tell us everything, and then an example or two of something that has soared ahead because of the new demands of this challenging era?
Well, it was. I completely agree with what Uri said. We moved from our comfort zone to new zone. Through the entire time, Rafael kept on working. We still have to produce Iron Dome missiles. Doesn't matter if there's pandemic or no. So Rafael was working through the entire time in shifts and according to the Ministry of Health regulations. But we learned from that pandemic time that company needs to work both in physical world and in digital world. Okay, we cannot focus only on one world. Well, the pandemic moved us from the physical world towards the digital one, but in a couple of months from now, we can all be under a cyber attack, for example, then we have to move from the digital world to the physical world. So companies need to balance between those two. Well, I think Uri was right. I think one of the things that really flourished during this pandemic time is everything that has to do with data. One of our system, which we call Wisdom Stone, was able to do all the analysis for the Ministry of Health through the Mossad in Tel HaShomer, and was tracking together with professors from all the academias that contribute to us, together to solve and see where the pandemic is starting, where we have some new sprouts of new areas where we can find new people that got the pandemic. So everything that has to do with data really flourished during this time of the pandemic.
Okay, thank you. Both Professor Sivan, Dr. Idan, fascinating. I know that there'll be some Q&A, and I'm going to turn the program back to Scott to run the Q&A part of this call. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Uri. Thank you, Irit. Uri, going back to my previous comments, not only are you a brilliant nanotechnologist, but you can foretell the future, because I did comment at the beginning about your point of view that crisis can lead to opportunities, and that certainly did turn out to be the case. I want to thank all of you for participating. And to handle the Q&A session, I'd like to introduce Jerry Kleinman, ATS Executive Director of Principal Gifts, who will moderate the Q&A session with David, Irit, and Uri. Please continue to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your webinar screen to submit questions, and we will try to get to as many as we can.
Thank you, Scott. Nice to be aboard. I have a general question from several people about the state of the reopening of the Israeli economy and business, and when will tourists be welcome? And the second part is, what is happening with the Israeli GDP and unemployment? So I'll throw that to Professor Idan, to Dr. Idan at the moment, and then to David Nuri for comments.
Well, what we will see, I guess, in the near future, it depends on whether we're going to see the second or the third wave of this pandemic. I think everything has to do with that. Hopefully, things won't happen this way, so we have to be optimists. I'm not sure it's going to affect the GDP of the 2020, but there will be effects on 2021 in that respect. At least in the defense market, for the moment, I don't see as the one in charge of the R&D of Rafael, there's no change in the technology or the budget that I'm investing in that respect. But looking to 2021 or 2022, I think the world market of the defense is going to be much more difficult for companies, and that will affect us in the defense market doing the businesses with that. But unfortunately, we live in Israel. We are surrounded by our enemies, so there will be need for a defense company. Situation in the world is not so quite as well. We can see what goes on between the United States, Russia, and China. So, well, peace won't be here in the next few years. So what we have to do is to overcome these next 3 years, and I believe things will go back as they used to be before that.
I'll just add, Terry, I'll do very briefly on the tourism thing. But first of all, we don't know. But, in the last week or two, gradually schools have been going back. Mid-June, they're talking about places of entertainment reopening, cinemas, theater, and so on, with 75% maximal capacity. So with social distancing, Israeli soccer started at the weekend without crowds, right? So that, there's a gradual process, obviously. We heard today that some kind of leadership delegation from Cyprus and Greece is on the way here to discuss tourism back and forth. There's been talk of a sort of group of nations that are doing relatively well in fighting the virus, beginning tourism between them. We'll see how that plays out. The Israeli Airports Authority is demanding a return to relative normality, and the authorities are saying we can't do that yet. So the first thing I think we can say is in June, we're not going to have anything like anything remotely normal airport-wise. And maybe in July, if the trends are positive, there might be the beginnings of something. We want to reconnect to the world. Everybody wants to reconnect. It's not happening in days. Maybe it's happening, hopefully, in weeks. We'll see.
Interesting. There are 3 questions that deal with the brain drain between academia and the corporate world. And perhaps Uri and Irit can deal with this. In general, they're asking, there used to be a traditional concern about the brain drain between Israel and Europe and America. And now is it between the Israeli academic community and the corporate community? Is this shift going to mean not the end, but a completely different role for the Israeli research universities in relationship to the corporate world in Israel?
Well, I would say that broadly speaking, this is not yet an issue. Perhaps, maybe, in some segments of AI or big data, but those are marginal. The more fundamental issue is finding a new ecosystem, a new coexistence schemes between industry and the academia, because as I mentioned before, those very clear boundaries that existed between industry and academia are now blurred. And they're blurred first because industry does also fundamental research, but they're also blurred because technologies are now developed also very fast in a university, and technology transfer has become very sophisticated. We now devise very sophisticated schemes to support fast technology transfer from the university. But the boundary is also blurred in some other aspects. And one important aspect is actually education. There is a lot of talking now on lifelong learning, lifelong education. And I believe that this experience from recent years, where we basically taught online, all universities taught online, will make a big difference, will advance it very quickly. Large companies are also entering now education. So I believe that new alliances will be formed between industry and academia. The traditional division between them will change, but overall, I don't see, I'm coming back to your original question, we don't experience yet any significant brain drain from academia to industry. We see that even people from Technion that spend a year or two on leave of absence in industry, they tend to come back to the Technion.
Well, I completely agree with Uri. I think you are right. Well, we'll see stronger collaboration between the academia and the companies in the industry, because the fourth industrial revolution does affect and run much more quickly where you have the money. And if you're looking at this digital board, and the one that holds the data, which is the fuel for everything, are the large companies. So they are focusing on the basic research that is needed. And there are very strong collaboration between those companies and the Technion and otherwise. Uri and I, in the last 2 years, I think, speaking about quantum computers and how to invest them in Israel and how to develop them, what are the right relations that we both can have in Rafael and the Technion in building such a structure for the future of Israel, because this is the future if we're looking ahead of that. So I believe that we are going to see more penetration into this gray zone between the academia and the industry, and we have to see more collaborations between the two of them.
So let me pick up on that comment, because there are two questions here. One about the collaboration and cooperation between Israel and the United Kingdom in these areas, and a second one by the grandson of Colonel Elyashar, one of the founders of the Technion, about collaboration between the Technion and Israel and the Arab world. So I will pose that to you from two very different angles.
Louis?
All right. Regarding collaboration with Britain, I have to say, I'm speaking now about academia. There are, of course, numerous collaborations on a personal level. Research groups from Technion, from other universities in Israel, collaborating with British universities, which are excellent. I mean, they're really fantastic. We do suffer though, and I've been trying to promote it. We do suffer from the lack of a joint research foundation with England. We do have a binational science foundation with the United States. We have a binational science foundation with Germany. We are eligible to apply to European projects, but there is no dedicated science foundation that supports collaboration between Israeli academia, for that matter also industry, but Israeli academia and British academia. I believe that both countries can gain tremendously from that. I have to say that the style of science being done in England and in Israel is conceptually is similar. It is very easy for us to interact with British scientists, and such a joint science foundation, I'm sure, will be very, very fruitful. Regarding collaboration with the Arab countries, it's have to say that it is very rare. Well, there are always some indirect, we meet them in conferences, we speak with them, and so on and so forth, but unfortunately it is still marginal.
Irit, any comments? David, any comments about the collaboration?
Yeah, I'll just say that in respect, well, collaboration between Israel in the defense, at least in the defense area, Rafael was, I think, Alan, if I was right, a proud sponsors of the UK Technion Society ball gala that was in December, where you host Professor Nagel from the Technion. There are projects that we are doing with the Ministry of the British Ministry of Defense. So there is collaboration in the defense market between Israel and the Great Britain. I would be happy to see collaboration, the same thing that we are doing in research here with the Israeli academia, broadening up to academia worldwide. That can be an opportunity for us as well, because we are working with DARPA, for example, on certain projects. I'm sure we can do that with other universities around the world.
All right, I'm delighted to thank you all. Given the amount of time we have, I'd like to turn this over to Paul Charney, our colleague at Technion UK, and thank you all for your participation.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jerry Kleiman. Thank you, Scott Lee Muster, and all of you at the American Technion Society. It's a pleasure working alongside you. I want to particularly thank our speakers tonight, David Horowitz, Dr. Irit Idan, Professor Uri Sivan. I am Paul Charney, Chairman of the Technion UK, and needless to say, a massive supporter. Technion UK is one of the few registered charities in the UK that has the distinction of being born in the House of Lords in 1951. Technion UK works alongside all the Technions worldwide in order to help provide the Technion in Israel with all the tools it needs, the auditoriums, the research centers, the vital equipment, student housing, special projects, everything that it pretty much needs to do the special work that you do. I have to say, the Technion is the tip of the spear of Israel. It's the pride of the Jewish world. It's the best of us doing the best we can. And despite living in a country with all the difficulties and all the barriers, we only know one direction. As Frank Sinatra once told us, the best revenge is success. But most of all, I want to thank all of you that have joined us tonight, that stay connected, that keep us going. And because Woody Allen taught us that 80% of success is just showing up. So we're almost there. Let's stay safe. Let's keep connected. I want to thank you all, and over to you, Scott.
Thank you, Paul. It was great to be with you on this webinar. I want to congratulate you and thank you for your hard work, yours and Alan's and your boards. There's a real sense of rejuvenation in the UK, and it's wonderful to see. As we have just heard, the key to the Technion success is collaborative relationships. Technion faculty, undergraduates, and graduate students working together in multidisciplinary research on campus, interacting with industry, academia, and other thought leaders in Israel, will lead to sustained economic success well into the 22nd century. These are, no doubt, extraordinary times, but the Technion, with a global footprint and an international reputation as an innovation powerhouse, is well prepared to meet the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. I want to thank you all for joining us. I want to remind you that this presentation has been recorded so that you will have access to it later. You should receive a link within the next couple of days. Please join us again next week on Wednesday, June 10th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Central, and 9 a.m. Pacific for Sleep and Dreams during the coronavirus pandemic with special guests, Professor Peretz Levi, former Technion president and founder of the Technion Sleep Medicine Center, and Dr. Kanta Ahmed, who is a specialist in pulmonology, critical care medicine, and sleep disorders at NYU's Winthrop Hospital. You will receive an invitation to this and all upcoming sessions in our Live from Technion webinar series. I especially want to thank you for joining us today and for your support of the Technion, and I wish you all continued good health. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.